Here we are. Season 3 plows on. Today I'm reaching over to Oxford in the United Kingdoms and I'm bringing in Max Blansjaar,
Yeah.
who's really been making some cool music. Started off DIY, great singer-songwriter, and in June he has this new amazing record coming out that we'll talk a little bit about. So welcome, Max. Thanks for coming in and hopping on here.
Thank you so much. Pleasure.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure to speak with you and kind of get a little bit of your background. My first question is always the same. When did music for you become something that was going to be in your life, regardless of whatever else happened? When did you come to that realization? I know it started at quite a young age, but like even before that, like when did music really start to like reverberate inside you?
Well, I think the answer to that is that it was super early. So when I was about 3 years old, we moved from Amsterdam, which is where I'm from, to the UK. And my parents are both Dutch, and so this was really like a foreign country. And I apparently was very upset by this move. I mean, I was 3, so I don't really remember, but I was like really not feeling being in the UK, and I was sort of at home like sulking and staring at a wall and listening to like Dutch nursery rhymes or whatever. And so my mum thought maybe to cheer him up, we need to put him on these music lessons that she'd found. And so there were these group music lessons that were taking place locally, and she was like, maybe it'll help him to make friends or to kind of integrate. And so she did, and I totally loved it and did them for like 13 years or something. So that was my first I think, was like being in a deep depression from from being
We
in the
laugh.
UK.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
yeah. I
No,
mean,
it's tough.
and then music being introduced to me, or at least music lessons being introduced to me as this way of like meeting people and doing something together with new people in a way that perhaps would have been harder otherwise, because I didn't really speak the language in any
Right.
case. Yeah.
Right.
So I
Right.
think it's been this kind of social thing for me, I think,
Yeah.
initially, that then grew out into something else.
And what would that entail? Like, what do you do in the group? Like, what's the routine or?
We did some singing, we did some
Mhm.
playing the keyboard. That was the main thing. We played the keyboard.
Right.
And so I mean, I was 3, so there was this backing track, and the teacher would put it on, and then you'd like tap. There was a song called Ready Tap Pineapple. And you had like, it was like C sharp and D sharp, and you'd tap it 3 times at the right moment. And that was like everyone
Cool.
coming together. And then it grew more complex, of course, as I got older.
Right. That's
um,
cool.
so
That's
yeah, but
cool.
it was the approach, it was what's called a Yamaha music school. So the Yamaha has, as well as making motorbikes, has like its own approach to music education. And
Wow.
yeah, and their thing is like, we do it practical first, and then we introduce the theory kind of at a later stage, but they ground it in this like practical approach. Pretty cool.
Yeah, that's cool. And like, what were your first like influences music wise as you were growing up? Like, what did you gravitate to when you were starting to listen to other bands and musicians? What were those key bands or musicians that kind of like, wow, I love this. I think I could do something like this.
I think the absolute first one, and it's, I don't want to say it's embarrassing. It's not embarrassing, but it's like, it's not cool. But the first one that really got me thinking like, whoa, music can be more than just a pop song that's like kind of
Mm-hmm.
fun, was the band Franz Ferdinand.
Mm-hmm.
Um, who, I mean, my dad and my sisters were both really into or all I should say, really into like indie rock music in general, and kind of discovering new bands in that kind of area. And then I was listening to this Franz Ferdinand CD in the car, and I was like, whoa, this is really, it is poppy, of course, but it's also like
Sure.
kind of a little abrasive and like kind of weird to me as like a, what was I, like 9 or something? Well, maybe a little older,
Right.
but so that was the first band I think that really got me thinking like, um, what if, yeah, what if you did something strange? And I mean, strange, I use that word relatively, because I just been
Mm-hmm.
listening to like the charts and stuff.
Right. Right.
And then from there, I kind of grew further. But my family's always been into like discovering new bands. It's just I was the youngest, so I got there last, I guess.
Right. You got that whole inventory though of artists that, because I mean,
Yeah,
finding these indie independent artists, it's you got a mind for them, right? They don't appear often on charts or on streaming services where they are popping out.
no,
So
exactly.
you
And
gotta work for it.
it helped that we had a lot of CDs at home. And there was a guy,
Hmm.
I don't know if I can say this. Well, I can. There was a guy a friend who lived in Holland, and a thing he would do is like go to shops and shoplift empty CD cases because obviously they only put the CDs in after you buy them as like to protect against shoplifting. But he would just get the empty case and then he would rip the CD off the internet and then like burn it onto a CD and then put it in
Hmm.
this shoplifted CD case and then send it over to England and be like, check out the Libertines, which
Oh,
is
well.
anyway. And
That's
so
cool.
that's a bunch of our CDs at home and probably still some on the cabinet behind me
Right.
are like have this written in like permanent marker, like the Libertines, and all the tracks are in the wrong order and like
It's like an original copy in a
mm,
sense.
yeah, it's like one of a kind.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So, Max, as you were getting older, like 14, right, was, well, 15 was your first release, but I read that 14 was your first um, show that you put on.
Yeah, so I put on a show at 14. I didn't play, but I put it on, yeah.
Okay, so you were more promoting it and like setting it up.
Yeah, so it was a charity show. So I just like booked three bands and then had them play a charity show for Oxfam.
Oh, and like, how did you get started with that? Like, at such a young age, like, how did that come to be where you're promoting and around musicians and
Yeah, I mean, my sister was a drummer. Well, it still is a drummer.
Mhm.
My and she's a couple years older than me. And so she knew all these bands locally, and I had kind of got a way in through that. But I'd been a bit frustrated because I wanted to go to all these shows, but of course, since I was 14 and most of the
Right.
shows were taking place in like pub attics or basements or something,
Mhm.
I was
Mhm.
too young, they wouldn't let me in.
Mhm.
So it was kind of a thing of like, oh, I want to see some bands and I want to see a show, so I better put on a show that I can then myself attend because I'm putting it on, so how could I not?
That's
Um,
clever. Very
and so
clever.
I think it kind of grew out of that. It was definitely a thing of like I didn't fully know what I was getting into until I started, and then I thought, oh my god, this is actually um, a little difficult. But I did it; it was fine. But it was
Mm.
yeah, it was my sister's kind of contacts that meant I wasn't just some random kid who was like
Right.
emailing
Right.
people. And she was able to like, you know, if I was being really if I was phrasing something really embarrassingly, she could be like, "That's not how you email people about tech specs," you know. Like
Giving you,
yeah,
showing you the ropes a bit. Yeah.
you don't just order a lineup based on how many likes each band has on Facebook. Like that's not how that works. And I was like, ah, I'm learning already.
Yeah,
Yeah,
good lessons. Good lessons.
yeah, important.
So your first, record that you put out, Spit It Out, October 2018.
Yeah,
That was all self-recorded. You wrote the songs, you recorded the songs, it was all you.
yeah. So I recorded that album, sorry, that EP over the course of like maybe a year or a little bit less during lunch breaks at school. So we had this like
Hmm.
computer room that had a couple of Macs on it. Macs?
Oh,
No, the plural of Mac.
yep.
And just like an old version of Logic. And I was just
Hmm.
recorded on there in like 45-minute bursts while I was having lunch, more or less.
Well,
Yeah.
well. And where did these songs come from? Like, when did you start writing songs? Or like, you had your guitar, your keyboard. Like, what was the start of that? Like, yeah, I'm gonna write songs.
Yeah, I started writing songs probably about 14, at the same time I started putting on the shows, because I was like, I mean, going to a show is like the main thing, even now, that makes me want to write songs, because I see people playing their songs and I'm like, oh yeah. And then I go home and write stuff. So that was definitely when that started. But it definitely took a year or so before I mean, I didn't really know how to play the guitar, first of all, so I had to learn that.
Hmm.
And then it took about a year before I was like, uh, I overcame the fascination of like, oh, I can do this too, and then started actually doing it regularly. Because what I would do in the first instance is like write a song and then play it for like 5 weeks and not write anything else because I was like so amazed that I wrote a song.
Oh,
And then after a while, I was like, oh, you know, if you do it more, then you get better, it turns out. So probably, yeah, probably around like 14, 15, although in fact it came out when I was 15. So probably 14 was when most of those songs were written, I would
right.
say. Yeah.
Cool. And what was the first song? Like, what was that first song that you're like, that you wrote, that you were practicing, that you're like, I got something here, maybe. Like, what was that song? Was it off of that first EP that you put out?
I think so. I think the first song, there's a song on there called Stage One, appropriately,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which was the first. I think it was the first song where I was like, oh, I feel like I've really got something. There's a there's a riff that kind of it's like the outro riff. Where I remember writing that. It's like 4 notes or something. It's very kind of janky, but I wrote that and I was like, oh, I've really got something. And I was like doing a beat on my Casio keyboard. Um, and so I think that was the first one where I was like, this is, yeah, there's something in this maybe. But I also remember that song being very explicitly influenced by Darwin D's, um, in a way that was like, it was very, the way I wrote songs then, maybe less so than now, was like just very reflective of a particular thing that I was listening to. And I was like, I want to take this. And then it ends up not sounding like that at all because I I didn't have the production capacities to make myself sound like Darwin D's, even if I wanted to.
Right.
But
Hmm.
yeah, that's how it kind of grew, I
Interesting.
guess.
Interesting. So as you got older, you kind of you went to university to study music, and you're
Yeah,
presently doing that now, right?
yeah, correct. Last year.
Wow. Well, congrats on that. Um, it's kind of two different mindsets, though, eh? The academic music versus, the singer songwriter DIY kind of production. How do you, how do those two play together in your world of music and academics? And because it would seem like quite the clash, right? Where things are very studying music, it can be very complex and very sophisticated, like the minutia of it all. And then your songwriting and your production, um, much more raw and visceral. And how do those two things talk to each other in your world?
I think so when I first started studying music like at university, I was afraid because I had this idea of like making music is this slightly magical and ineffable thing. And then as soon as you learn too much about how that works, about like music theory, then
Right,
it sort of ruins it because then it's like when you're watching a magician or something, and then you
right,
know how the trick works, and then it's like, well, why am I even here? Um,
right.
so that was definitely one fear that turned out to be just completely fake. I don't believe that that's true at all anymore. I mean, the only thing really is that being able to express what you're doing in a kind of standardized theoretical way, like I'm playing a C major chord or like this interval is a minor six or something, all that does is like make communication between musicians much easier, in my opinion. So like if I'm in a rehearsal, it's much easier for me to say, hey, play that a minor third up rather than be like, move your finger up a bit. No, not that far. Like
Right.
it's just makes it easier. So that
It's
was
a common
definitely
language, eh? Common language
yeah,
that you can
common
say.
at least
Yeah,
among most of the people that I work with. So
right, right.
um that was something where those two approaches were able to kind of coexist. But I do think that it's important not to be swept up in like um heavy conceptualizing as you're writing pop music in particular. I mean, some people would probably disagree, but I think when you're studying music, you obviously think about it in this super broad context, a social context of like, what is influencing this and this, and like, what
Mm,
does this really mean, and that kind of thing.
right.
Um, but it's very difficult to hold all of that in your head while also trying to write a song. I think you have to be able to let it go a bit. So I think it was a question of like yeah, taking on board or incorporating what was useful, but then also being able to, and I think that's what I mean when I say it's two different ways of seeing the same thing, because it's you have to be able to put the academic stuff to one side to an extent and be like, I'll look at this later, but for now I'm making, and then you can analyze afterwards. Um,
Right.
yeah, but I don't
Do you
think it
find that?
ruins. I don't think it
Yeah.
ruins it in the same way that I was afraid it might.
Right. Right. Do you find that you have a good reflective practice after you've like put something down on tape, listening back to it, that more academic comes in where you're kind of like deconstructing or looking more closely at the pieces?
Um, yeah, I do think what it's made me better at is being like, uh, what am I really trying to do here?
Hmm.
Which I think is an important question when you're making any kind of music, is like, regardless of how it's received, like what is really my intention here? Is my intention just to write a cool pop song, which is a valid intention and it's completely fine. But is that what it is? Or like, am I trying to do something else? And if so, then what is that? And like, do I really, yeah, it's just exercising just a kind of critical view on yourself, I think is good
Right.
without getting too
Right.
swept up in like existential questions like, what does this mean? Or why am I doing this? Which is not
Right.
necessarily helpful.
Right. Right. Um, well, it kind of brings me to your release that's coming out June 1st, False
Tw-
Comforts.
21st.
Um, 21st, sorry,
Yeah.
June 21st of this year. Right in the start of the summer.
Yeah.
How did that record come to be, and how did your music shift a little bit? Because you were doing a lot of this stuff on your own prior, and then this one was a big production. You came to Brooklyn. You were, I mean, you had an amazing producer that
Mm.
helped you kind of create and maybe reflect on some of the songs. I read somewhere where you were putting your voice through distortion, and it was decided, or some of them where just let your voice come through clean. Um, Tell us a little bit about that record, and how that shift started to happen in, you know, in your music writing, and the stuff that you're putting out there for the world to hear.
Yeah. I think when I was working on my own, it was in a way easier because whatever decision I made was like, that was what we were going for, you know, and then other people didn't hear it until it was finished, it was ready to be mixed.
Right.
But then I'd done these two EPs that way, and I was kind of speaking to Ben, who runs Beanie Tapes, which is the label that's putting it out, and we were like, it would be
Mm.
cool to kind of try and expand this a little bit, because as soon as you work with someone else, they kind of make you realize that the way that you do things is not the only way of doing things or the necessary way of doing things,
Yeah.
which looking back seems obvious. But the distortion thing is a good example, because I was like always putting loads of distortion on my voice, which was
Hmm.
partly because maybe I didn't have the best mics in the world, or like I was on my lunch break and I couldn't afford, I didn't have the time to do like 5 vocal takes, you know, whatever.
Right.
But I think also to some extent it was because the idea of having my voice really clean freaked me out a little bit, or made me a little bit uncomfortable. Um, and then we were working with Katie von Schleicher and Nate Mendelsohn in Brooklyn, and they made me see that in a different way, because they didn't take it as a given that we would just drench my voice in distortion. They were like, we can have it clean here and here. And I was like, no, make it sound like it's coming through a telephone. And they were like, why? So it's that kind of thing. And that's why I was glad to go over there and work with someone else, because it just opens you up to, yeah, different approaches in a way that
Mhm.
can take songs places that you didn't think that they would go. I mean, there's a couple of songs on the album that I was like, oh, I want to cut these. When they were at the demo stage, I was like, oh, I want to cut these because I don't think they're good. And then we take them to the studio, and then Katie and Nate would would have this idea, and then suddenly I was like, whoa, this is a completely different song now. So it's really powerful,
Cool.
but it really took some getting used to, obviously, because
Sure. Yeah.
having
Was was that the first time that you had a producer that wasn't yourself?
yeah, that was the first time. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh,
And
that's
we
cool.
wanted to go over there because, well, we were just a big fan of Katie's stuff,
Hmm.
and then Nate's stuff as well. And their production style is like really gets that balance right between stuff being gritty and interesting and memorable, but also accessible and well produced and like crisp, um,
Yeah.
which is really great. I was definitely on the like gritty trash end. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I glean from. I was fortunate enough to get a little preview of the record, and it is crisp. I love that word that you used. It's so clean, but it's still you. I mean, you really get a sense of your voice a lot
Mm.
clearer too. I just love it. I mean, you got a great voice.
Oh, thank you.
You know what you can do, and you do it super well, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's yeah.
Yeah.
I try to stay within my limits, but that was I was glad I'm glad that you think that about the voice.
Yeah. Oh, it's really beautiful. Just the record through and through. I kind of mentioned to you before we hopped on here that it's just a great flow. Every song kind of feeds into the next, and it's kind of a nice roller coaster of indie pop. You know, I mean, there's some slow, there's some faster. I mean, it's such a great variety, and I think your voice accompanies your melody so well. It's just like a really cool fusion. Um, so, Max, just to kind of bring things to a close here, again, thanks so much for joining me. This has been a real treat. I love your stories and how you explain and describe things. It's been really cool.
Thank
I've
you.
liked it a lot.
Pleasure.
Um, yeah. My last question is like, what's coming down the pipe in 2024 for you? So, what can we expect from we have the records coming out in June? What are some other things that might be of interest for people listening?
So yeah, the record's coming out on the 21st of June. And then we'll play a couple shows around the UK, um, unconfirmed, or at least cannot be confirmed as yet.
Right.
But that'll
Sure.
come out at some stage, and we'll play a run of shows around then, a couple festivals, and then yeah, it's remains to be seen onto the next one, I guess. But yeah,
And
we'll
you're going to
play a
be
bunch of stuff.
graduating this year as well. Like this is the year you're
Yeah,
going to graduate
yeah, yeah,
university.
yeah, as well. Yeah, so
Cool.
this is my final. I've got exams in like a month and a half.
Well, well, good
Yeah,
luck in finishing your degree and getting that done. And a tag on question. I'm going to do
yeah.
a bonus question just because you sparked a. What, what do you hope for, Max? Like, what do you hope for when this record comes out? Like, what would be success for you with this record?
Um, I think getting to I don't want to hinge the success of it just on how many people hear it. I don't think that's right. But it would
Right.
be nice for it to be heard by a bunch of new people
Mm-hmm.
who hadn't heard my stuff before, which is already happening, to be fair. So in that sense, I'm already pleased. Like a week after the first single has come out, um, and yeah, just it being like people finding it interesting in some ways is always nice. I mean, we got a really nice review. We got a bunch of nice reviews of the first single, but we got one that was super nice from Philip Zemchik from Start Track, the blog.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that meant a lot because he's like a music lover who really cares about the stuff that he writes about. And he took the time to write this super nice review. And I'm like, that's what I want. I just want like, I just want cool people to like my album.
Right.
And then I'll be happy. People, yeah, people I would have over for dinner. No, but I guess that's what I'm getting at. It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
I hope it kind of can mean something to people in whatever way. I hope it can be kind of liked as a thing in itself rather than like just in relation to me or something.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's done it for me. I'll tell you that.
Thank you.
We're going to play this first single off of it, Anna Madonna, which is an absolutely great track. So stick around. You'll hear that at the end of our chat. But yeah, solid songwriting, really solid. And I think it is so accessible for so many different types of people as well. Like, you know, people that like rock, you know, like all different styles. You can find a way into this record, regardless of what you typically listen to or whatever. So
brings everyone together.
Brings everyone together. Thanks, Max. Well, thank you again. This has been a real fun thing. I wish you the best with the record and happy graduation.
Thanks so much. Don't say that yet.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, right.
And we'll be following you. I look forward to seeing what comes next in this early career that you've started.
Nice one. Thanks so much.
Cheers.
Anna Madonna, don't pull the plug on me. Don't make me the victim, 'cause it's been a hard few weeks. Oh, I know they pull you in every direction. I know the music gets a little loud. I know that life's a pretty pricey vacation, but don't take it out on me. It's nothing to do with me. Anna Madonna, don't shut the door on me. Don't block all your windows so nobody knows you're here. Oh, I know you're sick of the political climate, and every day you fight a hopeless war. I know you think your girlfriend hates you in secret, but don't take it out on me. It's nothing to do with me. Best walk away from me. You're killing me slowly. I'm finding it hard to breathe. Oh,